Is the Apostle Paul guilty of promoting an oxymoron? For, after all, isn't that what the term spiritual body is? An oxymoron? Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas. And this is your daily devotional for Friday, April 25th, 2025. Today we pick back up where we left off yesterday, where Paul was responding to the Corinthians' objection to the idea of the resurrection. They wanted to know how in the world dead, decomposed bodies could be resuscitated and made to live again. Their objections were typical of the Greek thought world that saw the physical body simply as composed of corruptible stuff, quite separate from the incorruptible soul or spirit, a soul that they typically believed was trapped in a mortal and corruptible body. We saw that Paul's response to them was to call them fools. Why? Because they were thinking in too literal a way about resurrection. In the section we read yesterday, Paul compared the body we have now, when it dies, to a seed that produces a very different kind of body. It's a nice metaphor, and one I frequently turn to, but as with nearly every other metaphor, it is not perfect. In today's reading, we pick up exactly where we left off yesterday, and Paul provides more nuance to his answer to the Corinthians. And his answer incorporates the distinction he has already made between Adam and Christ. Yesterday's reading ended with the sentence, "If there is a physical body, there is also a spiritual body." Now Paul says, "Thus it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. But it is not the spiritual that is first, but the physical, and then the spiritual. The first man was from the earth, a man of dust. The second man is from heaven. As was the man of dust, so are those who are of the dust. And as is the man of heaven, so are those who are of heaven. Just as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we will also bear the image of the man of heaven." This is Paul at his theological and rhetorical best. But his answer may confound some in the Christian community even today who look for a resurrection of bodies out of caskets and graves. Let me explain. Paul draws a distinction between the first man, Adam, and the last Adam, who is Christ. The first man was made of the dust of the ground and brought death into the world through his disobedience. The last Adam, Christ, came into the world as a flesh-bearing human being like the rest of us, but in his death and resurrection became what Paul calls a life-giving spirit. What Paul is really trying to do here is connect the dots between the physical body we have now and the spiritual body that is to come. But it is a heavy lift because none of us has ever experienced a spiritual body. We simply have no reference points to imagine it, let alone picture it. Once again, it is a concept that is literally unimaginable, or, as I often say, it is an idea that is way above our pay grade. The problem is, we are a lot like the Corinthians. We want a literal explanation. We want to know, for example, if our bodies decompose, how can we be resurrected? If we undergo cremation, for example, can God find all the atoms that had composed our earthly bodies and reconstruct us? But as Paul says to the Corinthians, this is to miss the point entirely. The resurrection is not about another physical body. Rather, it is about a spiritual body. But that's where we get stuck. And it's where the Corinthians got stuck, though for somewhat different reasons. They simply could not imagine how a decomposed body could be resuscitated. We can't imagine a resurrection without the literal physical elements of our present bodies. When Paul talks about a spiritual body, it sounds, therefore, like an oxymoron to us. For by definition, we believe, The spiritual is incorporeal. It is the opposite of anything to do with the body. How then can we envision a spiritual body? All Paul can do is offer a metaphor, the seed that is buried and the plant that it produces, and a comparison between Adam and Christ. The metaphor breaks down at the point where the resurrection body is also made of stuff like a plant or a tree, but for Paul, it does have the advantage of getting us out of thinking that the resurrection body is like our present physical bodies. Look, I know this is devilishly difficult to comprehend because of our need to envision a literal physical resurrection of our present bodies as we know them. What Paul challenged the Corinthians to do, just as he challenges us, is to step out in faith and place our faith on a different basis from what we can see. As he says in 2 Corinthians 4, we look not at what can be seen, but at what cannot be seen. For what can be seen is temporary, but what cannot be seen is eternal. A spiritual body. Maybe it's not as much of an oxymoron as we think. When we return tomorrow, Paul wraps up this discussion of the resurrection. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.